GPU. People often talk about a GPU, or a graphics processing unit. It's the card that you put into your computer to allow you to play better looking games. And in the last few years, they've gotten crazy good. And also crazy expensive. This bad boy right here, well, it costs about $1,000 if you want to buy it new. And that's just the normal price for a regular GPU. Because this right here is the absolute high end for gaming, which is quite cheap compared to, oh no, AI graphics cards. So what the hell is going on with people buying a computer part, not a whole function computer, just a part for the price of a reliable Toyota? Especially when, look, it's a laptop from 2013. When this thing was new, it sold for about $250 bucks, which is about a fifth of the price of this thing here. And let us just power it on, shall we? Open up. It does need a bit of power because, you know, this thing is over 10 years old, but let's turn it on. Open up a game here, and there you go. It's a fully functioning game. So if this computer can run a game just fine, then why exactly do we need a GPU? That is what I want to explore today. What is it that a GPU does? How does it help you play your games better, and why do AI and crypto people love them so much that they're willing to spend crazy money on them? Now, quick question right now. What do you think a graphics card does? Come on, get down in the comments there and just type your answer. No cheating by looking at our comments. Oh, I'm watching you. If you're someone like me, you probably said something along the lines of, oh, well, you know, it's called a graphics card because it does like the graphics, like the colors on screen, like it makes those appear. And technically, you would have said the right thing, even though you're probably very wrong. These right here are pixels. They're like tiny red, green, and blue lights that together make up the entire image that you just saw on the display. They're so small, in fact, that right now, I'm using a magnifying glass right here to show them to you, because otherwise the camera won't pick them up. And to give you a little bit of scale, this right here is my finger. I always thought that the GPU would kind of just get this list of colors from the PC, which would tell it like what color to make like each pixel and such, and then the GPU would actually like do the part of turning the pixels onto different colors. So in this case, it would have to make this part right here orange, and then that part more purple, and that part black. And then for games, obviously they'd be more intensive because, well, games are very colorful, a lot is happening, and they show a lot more colors than just your standard run-of-the-mill office program. So in that way, you know, their graphics card is literally making the colors right here on the screen. But that's not how it works at all, because this is actually the task of the display. Right now, I've unplugged this display from the HDMI cable from the computer, so it has no connection to a computer or a GPU, but it does have power. Watch what happens as I turn it on right now. Here, we have color, we have text, so this display can color in the pixels. It can show you something, but it just doesn't know what to show you because it has no signal. But then, if the GPU makes the colors on the screen appear without actually turning on the colors on the screen, then what actually does it do? Well, remember how I thought that the graphics card would get this list of pixels from the PC to turn on by itself? Well, now that the display actually does the turning on of the pixels, then, well, naturally, the graphics card actually does the list making. But then, how does it do this? And here it's time for me to say goodbye to any remaining retention that was on this video because, oh boy, it's boring time. And not just a boring time, the ultimate boring time. As the main thing that your GPU does is, well, it's math, which I know is everyone's most favorite subject. However, actually, this math was one of the few kinds of math which I actually quite enjoyed. And the thing is, I was only taught this once I got into university, so I'm going to try and explain it to you and make it as interesting as possible. To get started, let us go and take a look at the final end product of what we want to make, which is like a display that shows us something. Now, this display is too small to actually work with the GPU, so I'm just going to go and put it here as reference material. And instead, what we're going to use is this picture of a display that I drew up. So what we see right here is like a display made up of several pixels, and then it shows like a red rectangle behind a purple triangle. Now the task of the GPU is to provide this information, like which color each pixel needs to be, to the display. But how can it tell it that? What we could probably do is, you know, name every single pixel after like a letter right here, and then we just make a list that says, well, pixel A right here is black, pixel E right here, right there is red, and then pixel H is purple. And then right there, you know, like that should probably work, right? Well, that's the question. Because even if this would work, it's not very useful, since a display doesn't know any colors at all. Which may sound very weird, however, let's take a look at this LED strip right here, which, just like a display, can show many different colors from each of its little lights. I said earlier that a pixel was kind of like this collection of red, green, and blue lights, which is something that you can see very clearly in this LED strip, which can also turn from red to purple. If we go and zoom in on this, what you see here is that the light is red. Now I can't really get it to focus all that well, however just trust me that this light is red. If I now turn it slowly to purple, what you find is that the light doesn't turn purple, however instead it turns on a second blue light, which you can see just above my fingernail there. You see that we see purple in the light, however it's actually because you see in the reflection, there's a red and blue light that's turned on right now. A display works in the exact same way. It only has red, green, and blue lights to work with, so it doesn't really know what purple is since it doesn't have a purple light. What we need to do is we need to remember our primary school painting classes, and remember that if we want to get purple, we need to mix red with blue. So what we need to ask for is a bit of red, a bit of blue, and no green. Alright then, let's go replace this list that only we can read with a list of colors that the display may be able to read as well. Which, right here we see that black is, written right now as no red, no blue, no green. Red is written as 255 red, no blue, no green. And then purple is written as 150 red, 100 blue, and no green. However, it is a lot of information though. This whole piece of paper still doesn't contain half the screen right here. Now keep in mind that on this video with 1920 by 1080 pixels, which shows at 60 frames per second, we need 124 million pixels to change color every single second. With this list only showing 15 pixels, that means that for 124 million pixels, we're gonna need a longer list. A much longer list. Now, this right here is where we can have the math help us out. So what we see right here is that we have quite a big issue because we're only working in one single dimension. So for each pixel, we only have a single line. For each color, we also have a single number. It would be kind of nice if we could just kind of condense it down, that we can only give one single number for what we want. However, we can't because right here we can only put in the value for 0 for red, but then we don't know what blue and green will be. But what if I told you that you can actually write all the values for red, green, and blue in a single number? Oh yeah, boys, we're getting into the good stuff now. Because so far, we've been working with, regular old numbers. 0, 255, 150, numbers that we all know and love. But do you know the name of these numbers? Because the name of these numbers is scalars. And scalars are one-dimensional numbers, which means that this number only has, one dimension to it, one value. Red right here has the value of 150, which right here would be 150. But it doesn't show us blue and green. If you want to show blue and green as well, we could write these numbers in a column to get a vector. Now a vector is also one single number. We can do math with this. However, it shows us multiple dimensions in a column. So right here we have 150, 100, and 0. Now this may seem really weird, dimensions, columns, scalars, vectors, oh my god, what are all these terms? However, let's just keep it simple and just look at what we're doing. Right now we're creating a number which has a red, blue, and green value, which means that if we look at this list, instead of having to make separate values for each, we can replace them with vectors, and this just shows the same information that we've had before. Red, blue, green, 0. Red, 255, blue, green, 0. And then right here, red, blue, green. So basically, we're making it a little bit simpler. But now, because this is a single mathematical number, what we can also do is we can do some math with this. So let's say we take this purple pixel and we want to make it darker, we can multiply all these values by 0.5 to get a darker picture. So while it may sound very complicated with the words that we're using, we're actually making our lives a lot simpler because we no longer have individual categories for each color. We now have one single number for each pixel, which means that we can fit a whole lot more pixels on this one sheet of paper. However, it's still not complete. We're still missing 2 pixels right here, which means that we need to find some way to condense this down even more. Would it be possible for us to also get rid of these single instance lines for each pixels and just show the entire display as one single number? Oh well, yes we can. Welcome to matrix math, which is taking a single number and not just giving it a column, but also giving it rows. Which When it's talk about matrices and columns and rows, like, honestly, like, it can get really convoluted. It's like, what do you mean? What are all these terms? But let me just, like, show you by just putting this thing right next to here and saying that this right here is the matrix for the red pixels. So what we see here, we have a black pixel, which has 0 value for red. We have a red pixel, which has a 255 value for red. We have a purple pixel, which has 150 value for red. Do you see? Right here, this matrix is just copying like the pixel structure like one for one. And because of that, we can just, you know, make this little thing right here where we have red, blue, and green, and it just shows the display. And this right here is what it really means for your GPU to turn on colors on your display. It's not coloring it in with paint. What it's doing, it's giving the matrices for red, blue, and green to your display, so your display knows which to turn on with how much intensity and then show you the colors. The great thing about GPUs is that they're precisely made for doing these types of calculations like all at the same time. Now there are some CPUs which can do these calculations as well, which is why not every single computer needs to have a GPU. However, the GPU is so much better at it because it was actually made for this kind of stuff and also has this insane cooling to cool it down while it's doing it. Because this right here, like this tiny little thing right here in between like this backplate and this cooling thing, that's actually the GPU. This right here is just all to cool it down while it's doing its like insane task. In fact, why don't we take a look at the difference between this RTX 3080 GPU and this R5 7600 CPU. To test how good these guys are at creating graphics, what we're gonna need is a benchmark, which is basically a program that creates like this small little game world where this camera moves around in and then sees how good like either the GPU or the CPU is in showing me the frames right here. The test right here will take us through this game world in the exact same way every time that we run it, and then we'll keep track of like what our frame count is per second, and also it will give us a score at the end of like how good our graphics card or our CPU is in making these graphics. All right, let's get started with the CPU first. Now, the CPU is not actually in here, it's just a sticker because, you know, the CPU is in the computer. But let's get started with a test right here. This right here is the little world, and we're gonna click benchmark. And as you can see, it is benchmarking right now, which means it's running the test, and yeah, we're moving as a camera through this world. I don't know if you can see it, but here in the top corner, we see the FPS, and we also see that right there. But it's really, really small, so I'm just going to rate that right now. It is 3.4 frames per second. Now, you know, keep in mind that we need about 24 frames every single second to see like a video moving. Otherwise, it's going to be like this, kind of like a slideshow. So this is not really fluid motion. But hey, you know, maybe the test is really hard. At least we can make out that this is a world. And, you know, the colors seem to be okay. Alright, the test is done and we finally have our results, which for the CPU is an average FPS of 3.9 frames per second, so not really fluid motion, but hey, we got a score of 98 and we got a maximum FPS of almost 8. Good job, guy. Almost 8 frames per second. I mean, that's reasonable, I guess. I hope. I mean, it's now big boy time. We have 3.9 frames per second to beat on average. So if we say like 3 or 4 frames per second, maybe 4 or 5, this one will be better. So let's see. You can't really tell it right here because it's really small. So I'm just gonna go read it out. We have a 600, 700 frames per second. Holy shit, man. I mean, you can kind of tell the difference. So we have right now, it is running at 500 frames per second or something. The average is 614 frames per second. Like, whoa! Do you see the power of the GPU? Oh, man. Oh, it's gonna be a beatdown. It is gonna be a beatdown. But by how much? So, as a quick reminder, the CPU right here, which has been beaten out of its place, we can't even see the sticker anymore. Oh boy, has an FPS score of 3.9 on average and a max FPS of 7.5. Whew, it's gonna be tough. GPU, what did you have? Oh no, average of 627 FPS. Minimum FPS is 74. 10 times more than his max FPS. And the max FPS is 1,043 frames per second. Like every second, that was 1,050 frames almost. And yeah, the score is 98 versus 15,803. Yeah, the GPU, it's better. But then what's going on with this CPU right here that the results are, well, this fucking bad? For something that also does math, like just picking a color using numbers, like, that can't be too hard. Now can it? Well, the thing that makes this test so hard, and graphics in general so hard, is that we don't just need to, like, determine the code for each color in order to show it on the screen. There's a whole big process that happens before we can even, like, show color. And that all happens with the world that we're in. The world that we're seeing here, like, is made out of little things. Now, what are these things made out of? Settings, wireframe. What we see right now is that everything in this world is made out of, like, little tiny points. Like, they're models which have little points that form triangles between them. And these triangles are all calculated using, you guessed it, matrix math. So you see it when we change scene. Like, first of all, like, it needs to determine where all these models go. Then it needs to determine where all these points are and what the triangles are, and then it needs to determine, okay, what kind of color goes in there. But it's not just that. There's also another thing that we can adjust right here in the scene right now. Camera free. Now that I have control of the camera, we can look at all this stuff right here, and it's in the world. But let's say that I'm looking right here. Now all that stuff doesn't need to exist. It doesn't need to see it. Which means that our FPS count can go up because it doesn't need to calculate where all this stuff is because there's no need to show it. But how does it know what the camera can see? The only way it knows that is to calculate, like, the camera field of view, which is basically like everything that you can see. Like right now my hand is in the field of view, but right now it's not anymore. So it needs to calculate this field of view and also needs to calculate, like, what is in front of something. Like right now this stuff is in front of me, so you can't see me, but you can see this stuff. Right now I put it behind me and you can't see it anymore. So, just like with the camera field of view, it doesn't need to show these models right here if it's behind me, but it does need to show it if it's in front of me. The way that it does that is, again, by calculating the coordinates, calculating how far it is, like making a depth matrix of, like, is this closer to the camera or further away? It's even more matrix math. Alright, you say, I can see it, you know, you don't just need to calculate the colors, you also need to calculate the models and where they are, and then you also need to calculate where the camera is looking. That will probably be it, right? Not entirely. I mean, we also have this little time slider in the environment, which makes us turn it from day to night. Why would this be in a test? Well, that's because we can see the colors change as the light changes. So this is also something that we also need to calculate, which was like this little example right here. We can adjust the colors based on the brightness of the light. So if it gets darker, we show less of the colors. If it's brighter, we show more of the colors. This is something that needs to be done based on the light source. So right here, as the light goes on right here in this little mill, it needs to determine, oh hey, there's light here, and where does this light hit, and what is being shown, like what's being lit up. That's, again, another form of math that needs to be done. And like so, there are still many things that are done at the same time. I just want to give you a rough idea of the processes that are needed to make the graphics appear in the game. You need to calculate the models, you need to calculate where they are, you need to calculate whether they show up or not, and then which place they show up and which ones are shown or not, and then what color they will be based on the light and a lot more. Because of that, like the 3.9 frames per second that the CPU puts out are actually kind of impressive. Now I want to highlight that this CPU is not really that much weaker as you think it is compared to this GPU. Like this CPU is pretty strong, but it is very strong in like a whole bunch of things. It's a central processing unit. This GPU, however, it's very specialized in doing exactly this kind of math. And it's precisely because these things are so good at doing this kind of math that GPUs are so beloved by crypto and AI people. Now I can't talk too much about crypto stuff because, to be honest, I don't know too much about that. However, I do have a degree in AI, which means that, well, like, it makes sense to me that we learn so much about this stuff because, well, you know, this stuff, these matrices are used so much in AI algorithms. Like, right here, we use this matrix to represent, like, the red pixels in the display. But what you can also do is, like, say, okay, I want to learn what are people watching. Well, I could make this channel A, channel B, channel C, and these are, like, the minutes watched of video 1, video 2, video 3. And this would be just like you. Like, how many videos have you watched on my channel? But then I could also go to person B and look at, like, how much they have watched. And based on that, like, these will just be single instances, and I want to have in an AI, like good AI program, I want to see maybe 100, 1,000, or maybe even 1 million people. So if we're working with that and we're doing calculation on that, oh boy, we're gonna need to do a lot of math on these. And yeah, this thing will be pretty good at that. If you've heard of like ChatGPT or all these other AI things that are going on right now with this AI boom, well, that's people churning through data, making algorithms to make programs that do things. And most of the time, if that program is successful, it makes them money. So because of that, it makes sense for them to spend a whole lot of money on even more powerful cards than these, because, well, you know, if it works in like making them run better algorithms, it will make them that money back. So that's why these really specialized cards are so insanely expensive. But even so, these cards, like the gamer cards, are also getting more expensive because, well, they're still useful for AI crypto stuff. So where previously people would not really spend $2,500 on a gaming graphics card, well now, some people are doing that. That's about it. The GPU creates graphics through math, which is also very useful for AI and crypto stuff. I hope that explains kind of what a GPU does, and I really hope I haven't bored you to death with this video. There's still a lot more to cover on these things because it's not just the things that we talked about. There is still so much more, like aspects like deep learning supersampling, ray tracing, rasterization, which is kind of like the stuff that we did. And then, oh boy, there's so much more with video encoding and all that sort of stuff, which we'll take separate videos to explain. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Other than that, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the content that I make and you want to support me as well, check out Overtime, which is my exclusive show for $1 a month via Patreon, or for free if you have Amazon Prime and Twitch Prime. Then yeah, I make extra videos at the end of every one of these videos, where today we looked at like this little LED strip right here, and what you may have noticed in this shot right here is that there's a new LED strip right there. Well, I actually put that up last week, and yeah, I shot an entire video of that. I kind of wanted to make that a vlog on this channel, but it didn't pass the quality test. However, that's just become an Overtime right now. There's a whole bunch more content on there, so you also have my blessing to just go over there for $1, watch everything, and then never come back. You do you, but I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.